Welcome everyone. This is Joy Taylor from Siskiyou County, and we're in for I'm going to say we're in for a treat because I know that our presenter is full of service and character, and this is a little bit of a daunting topic. He said it's not for the faint of heart, but the good news is we do have a guide. So we welcome you all to this free webinar on Contracting 101. And this is going to be a webinar all about how you can sell to the federal government. So welcome again, and next slide, Paul, would be great. How to get the most out of the webinar? Well, like anything, hope you are going to take notes and just be an active listener. You can hide the control panel by clicking on that little orange arrow, and it will hide the control panel. But on the control panel, you'll see there's a little arrow that says questions. As we move through this webinar, if you do have any questions or comments, please go ahead and type them in that question box. We do not have audio, but I will ask the question of our speaker today, and we'll make sure that we answer the questions that do come in. So enjoy this webinar, and I hope you can apply it to your business, which is really going to be one of the benefits for many of us. We need to answer the question, can we sell to the government? We're going to learn that and a lot more. Next slide. I did want to just shout out to these incredible organizations that make webinars like this possible and also make this kind of training and support and help possible for small businesses around the country. So Jefferson Economic Development Center, the Women's Business Center, and the Northeastern California Small Business Development Center are all collaborators on bringing forth lots of services here in the region, including training classes, workshops, private business and financial consultations. We have a computer and graphics lab in Mount Shasta, a library of resources. We do tax preparation. We have a matched savings program. We help you plan your business and write business plans, as well as apply for loans. And for growing and thriving businesses with employees, we also have some advanced business development services. So on to our webinar today. I'd like to introduce to you our speaker. This is Paul Tavernia, and he is the lead business opportunity specialist for the U.S. Small Business Administration in Sacramento. We're so grateful you're going to be with us because you actually lead a team of business development specialists who focus primarily on government contracting. And so I know that you interface a lot with the federal government agencies, and you ensure that small businesses participate in contracting opportunities. I know we're going to learn a lot today, so I'm going to hand it over to you, Paul, and just thank you again for offering this to us up here in the far north of California. We really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you very much, Joy. It's my pleasure to conduct this webinar today. Hopefully, by the end of today's session, you'll have a greater understanding or a better understanding of just what's kind of involved with trying to do business with the federal government. But before we get to the meat and potatoes, if you will, I thought I'd give you a little bit of an overview of the SBA and kind of our core missions, if you will, as a federal agency. Primarily, our mission, as you can see, we sum it up as 3 C's and a D. I'll start with the D, which is basically whenever there's a declared national disaster, that's when the SBA actually can come in and lend money directly to not only business owners but also homeowners as well, to help them recover from nationally declared disasters. Here in California, with the wildfires we're having, you can imagine that our disaster operations group is going to be very, very busy in the months ahead, helping folks out as they try to recover from some of the bad things that have been happening around our state this year. But the 3 main missions on a day-to-day basis: capital. The SBA, we don't lend money except in the disaster situation. We don't lend money directly, but what we have is loan guarantee programs. The flagship program, the 7A program, is a general purpose loan guarantee program. So the loans that we guarantee, 75% of the loan that the bank makes to you, are general purpose. They can be used for business acquisition, inventory, working capital, whatever the case may be. And the other major loan program, the 504 loan program, is primarily for those businesses that want to own and occupy commercial real estate. The other two entities, SBIC and SBIR, are more kind of venture capital type operations where we'll provide funding to investment companies to help them in turn look for investments in small emerging companies that may have a specific technology or specific capability. From a counseling standpoint, we have 10 people in our district office here, so we are available for one-on-one counseling as well. But as Joy mentioned, we rely very heavily on our resource partners to help provide the business consulting services or counseling services across our district. We rely heavily on the Small Business Development Center network throughout California and specifically in Northern California. The Women's Business Centers, both at Mount Shasta and down here in Sacramento. We've got a very robust SCORE organization in Northern California. SCORE, if you're not familiar with them, they used to be known as the Service Corps of Retired Executives. They're an all-volunteer nationwide network of consultants available to help small businesses with whatever issue, concern, challenge they might be facing. And then we also have procurement technical assistance centers. There's one in Eureka, there's one down in Monterey, we have one here in Sacramento that help businesses focus specifically on government contracting, in addition to federal contracting, but also state and local contracting as well. So that brings us to contracting, and as Joy mentioned, the team that I lead, we're focused on helping folks like you understand what it is, what's all about doing business with the federal government. We also help folks understand how to do business with the state of California and local entities as well. But primarily, our focus is small business contracting, the various small business set-aside programs that we'll get into, and the SBA is the keeper of the size standard. So we'll talk a little bit about industry codes. If you're familiar with doing business with the state, it's kind of a one-size-fits-all. If your revenues are less than $14 million, you're considered small. But in the federal arena, every industry code has its own separate and unique size standards. So we make things a little bit more complicated from that. But we are the keeper of the size standards. So, and one other thing I wanted to let you know is our district actually runs 21 inland northern counties. So we basically go from Stockton all the way to the Oregon border, and then from the Nevada border to the coastal counties. So we've got a pretty large geography that we're responsible for, and that's why we rely very heavily on our resource partners. So why sell to the federal government? Well, we buy everything there is, and of a $1 trillion a year budget, about half of that is discretionary spending, somewhere on the order of about $500 billion year in and year out, maybe some years a little more, some years a little less. But the intent or the target is that 23% of that number should be designated for small businesses on an annual basis. And the SBA is the keeper of the scorecard with the various federal agencies to help incent them, if you will, and ensure that they try their best to meet that 23% target. And the good news is last year was the first year that target was ever reached. So that's the good news, which means $80 to $90 billion worth of business went into, flowed through to small businesses. In addition to that, there are specific socioeconomic set-aside categories, and we'll get into the specifics of the requirements or the eligibility criteria. But those stated goals also: 5% for small disadvantaged businesses, which is primarily minority-owned; 5% for women-owned; 3% for hub zone; and 3% for service-disabled veteran. We take very seriously, and we grade every agency on a, like you're in school, A through F, and we give them a letter grade on how they're doing, and then that gets reported to Congress. So they try their best to get all A's, but I will tell you, not all of them are 4.0s. But anyway, so what we're responsible to do is help small businesses through these set-aside programs help attain some contracting activity. Kristen Ingebretson on my staff went through and looked at the federal procurement data system to kind of get an idea of which agencies are most active up there in the Northern California geography, and you can see from the columns that the Army, which is both the Corps of Engineers and, for instance, like Sierra Army Depot and Hurlong, do a lot of business. They are the biggest dog on the block, if you will, relative to federal contracting. But as you might imagine, the Forest Service, $15+ million last year, because there's lots of trees up there that need to be worked with. Federal Highway Administration is always very active up there with maintaining and renovating the highways up there. Defense Logistics, which is primarily fuel deliveries, and we'll see some more detail on the next page. And then you've got Bureau of Land Management, Department of Energy, Park Service, the VA, and the Office of Management Budget. But really the big ones are the Army, the Forest Service, FHA, prisons, and DLA. So just to give you a little more of an idea of where the opportunities might be, with the Army, the industrial building construction, that's a big number. That's probably most up out of Hurlong and the Sierra Army Depot. But they also do a lot of levee work, in-stream work as well up there. So if you're in the heavy civil or the commercial industrial building construction industries, that's where the opportunities lie. And you'll see it's kind of consistent throughout all the different agencies as well. With the forest, sure, forestry is the biggest portion of their work, but again, you've got a lot of highway and fire breaks. After a fire, they've got to bring in equipment to kind of reconstruct fire roads and that sort of thing. Then they'll look to small businesses a lot of times to perform those kinds of activities, and so on and so forth. You can see that the highways, the prisons, DLA, they spend significant amount of money. So, as you might imagine, in Northern California, from a federal contracting standpoint, it's very construction-centric. So now we're going to kind of get into the meat and potatoes of selling to the federal government. And these, I'll let you look at the list there and you can kind of peruse it. What we're going to do is we're going to kind of drill down a little bit deeper on each one of these sections in terms as you prepare yourself or you prepare your business to go out and look at the federal government as a potential customer space. But they kind of a lot of this is applicable no matter what sort of public agency you're going to go after, with the exception of maybe some of the upfront creating entities or profiles and that sort of thing. But so let's just kind of get started with that. So as I mentioned before, size standards are based upon the North American Industry Classification System, or NAICS code. That's what the federal government uses for each type of product and service. So you've got the link there to go to, and via keywords you can figure out what your primary industry classification is or industry code is, because you'll need that. You need to specify when you create your profile to do business with the feds. You need to specify what your primary industry code is, and you're not limited to just one. You can input all the industry codes that apply, but you have to identify your primary code for which at least I guess the majority of your revenues are derived. As you can see, the DoD uses a different Federal Supply Group classification. And just as a sidebar, the state of California, they do not use NAICS codes. They use the United Nations Standard Product Code. So if you're looking to do business with the state of California, then you go and look up whatever your UNSPC, United Nations Standard Product Code, is, so you can use that when you create your profile with the state of California. So, first steps to do business with the feds. Every business, large, medium, or small, that wants to do business with the federal government has to register in SAM, or the System for Award Management, and you can see the link there. The first step in that process is to get a DUNS number through Dun & Bradstreet, and the DUNS number is nothing more than your unique identifier to the government systems. It's similar to like, an EIN or a Social Security number, but it doesn't have those same type of ramifications. All it is just your unique identifier into the system. So once you've got your DUNS number from Dun & Bradstreet, then you can go back into SAM, and I'll tell you that if you go into sam.gov up the top, there's a Help tab. You click on the Help tab. Over on the left-hand side, it'll have user guides, and you can click on user guides and go down to the user guide where it says create a new entity, and then that will give you the step-by-step instructions in order to create a profile or an entity in the SAM system. And you can see the line that says develop an effective SAM and SBA profile. As you're going through and entering the data to create your SAM entity, you'll be prompted and asked if you want to go over and complete your SBA supplemental information. So you want to click yes, and then that'll take you over to the SBA where you can input your primary NAICS codes, your revenue information, and you can also do some self-certifications as being women-owned or minority-owned. But it's important that you do both, that you create your entity in SAM and that you create the supplemental SBA information as well. So then you're in our database, because our database is the record book, if you will, for small businesses from a federal government contracting standpoint. And the last bullet there is you want to make sure that you update your profile on a regular basis, just to make sure that the information is still accurate and correct, and to go on and make any changes that might have occurred, from the previous time that you updated your information. So now we can start getting into the different types of certifications. There's formal certifications where SBA is involved in the approval process, if you will, and then there are some self-certifications that we'll talk about next as well. So formal certifications, you may have heard of the 8A program. The 8A is more than just a contracting program. It's actually a 9-year business development program. So it's finite in length. The person or persons upon whom eligibility is based, it's a once-in-a-lifetime chance. So if that's something that could be applicable for you, one of the questions to have is, am I ready to do business with the feds or to go down the path of seeking 8A certification? Because, like I said, it's a once-in-a-lifetime program or once-in-a-lifetime chance. But again, a finite length of term is 9 years. The HubZone program, and we'll get a little bit more into that, is also a formal program, and that's more involved with incenting businesses to locate into areas that are experiencing economic difficulty or economic strife, and we'll get into kind of the nitty-gritty or the eligibility criteria for HubZone later as well. So SBA is involved in the approval process. There are sole source contract eligibility associated with those two programs. Where you see it primarily, though, is on the 8A Business Development Program. The sole source contract is actually the primary vehicle for helping those firms in the program grow their capacity throughout the 9 years that they're in the program. With HubZone, there is a price preference if the HubZone certified firm is actually competing in a full and open type of solicitation. For sole source, other than tribally owned firms and Alaska Native corporations, the thresholds are $6.5 million for manufacturing sole source and $4 million for all other requirements. Okay. Now we can get into self-certifications. The Women-Owned Small Business Program, the contracting program, kind of came finally into fruition in the 2010-2011 time frame as a result of the Small Business Jobs Act. So now there are specific categories, set-aside categories, that agencies can use to provide opportunities for women-owned small businesses. It used to be that you just went into the SBA portion of creating your profile and you check the box. Now it's a little bit more involved in that you upload documentation into a repository that has been put in place by the SBA. We don't control it, we don't have access to it, but because we understand that the nature of the information that you upload is very proprietary. But what it does is it allows an agency that if they're doing market research, and if you're a woman-owned small business and they want to verify that you are who you say you are and that you have the capabilities they're looking for, they would come to that women's-owned small business owner and ask for access to the self-certification information, if you will, as part of their ongoing market research activities. And that access is granted for only 120 days and then it times out. So it's not they would have access to it forever. Veteran-owned small business, self-certification, no real additional effort involved other than checking a box that's self-certified. Service-disabled veteran-owned, other than the VA, it's kind of a self-certification with the VA. For a service-disabled veteran-owned small business to do business with the VA, they have to go through their formal certification process, which you can see down at the bottom, this Certified Veteran Enterprise, the CVE process, because, and the reason it's important is that the Veterans Administration has the ability to do sole source contracts to service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses. So it's analogous to the 8A program in other agencies that the VA can do sole source to SDVOSBs. Small business determined again by NAICS code, and small disadvantaged business is a self-certification as well for those businesses that are economically and socially disadvantaged. And we'll get into that as well. So you've got the different categories and you're thinking, well, maybe one or two of those might apply to me, but why? Well, what they've done is they've carved out these socioeconomic categories in order to, like the slide says, level the playing field to give those businesses that maybe have, some challenges, if you will, kind of an opportunity to compete and gain contracting opportunities and that sort of thing. So we've talked about the different types, additional revenues. They can use them to target specific industries, especially in the women-owned and economically disadvantaged women-owned small business, where those classifications are actually industry-specific. And then, as I mentioned with the Hub Zone program, trying to improve economic activity in distressed communities where they're experiencing higher than median unemployment or lower than median average per capita income. So let's drill down a little bit further into the 8A Business Development Program. As I mentioned, it's a 9-year business development program, and the key eligibility criteria are the person or persons upon whom eligibility is based have to own and control, have to own at least 51% of the business and control the day-to-day operations. They have to be U.S. citizens and of good character. The 8A Business Development Program is not for startups, and the reason being that because of the sole source contract capabilities, the federal government wants to make sure that a business is able to execute on whatever the requirement happens to be. And for a startup, there's typically not that history for the feds to determine that that the business has the capacity to execute. So that's why we've got a 2-year business rule. Basically, the philosophy there is if the firm has been in business for at least 2 years, they're generating revenues, they're generating profits, they've got a positive working capital position and whatnot, then the likelihood of successful execution on a government contract, whether it's sole source or competitive, is there. So you can see the website there for additional information on the 8A program. But the net message is it's for businesses that have already been up and running. As I mentioned, the individuals have to be both socially and economically disadvantaged. Social disadvantage relates primarily to ethnicity, and you can see the ethnic groups there, where if you are a member of one of these minority groups, you are considered socially disadvantaged by default, if you will. The thing to note here is that gender in and of itself is not a basis for social disadvantage in the 8A Business Development Program. It is in other types of certifications. For example, the Caltrans Disadvantaged Business Enterprise or DBE certification. Gender is a basis for social disadvantage. But in the federal 8A contracting, gender is not included. Economically disadvantaged, these are people, in the 8A context, it's individuals that have had challenges in terms of access to capital vis-a-vis the general population at large. And it could be, we've seen it where they came into the country as, with immigrant parents living in, very poor areas, and just, it was a big struggle growing up, maybe thwarted their ability to go into higher education, those kind of things. Some of the empirical data, if you will, or the empirical thresholds for initial eligibility, total assets, which include business equity, cannot exceed $4 million for the individual. You can see personal income, $250,000 per year, averaged over 3 years, because if your income is in the $250,000 range, you're in the top 2% of all tax filers, and I think it would be hard to make a case that someone in that situation is economically disadvantaged. The personal net worth initial calculation is $250,000. Normal net worth minus those three components. The good news is, if you're married, all of those assets and liabilities get divided in half. So that presents maybe an easier way of qualifying. The Hub Zone program, again, ownership and control by a U.S. citizen, or in this case a CDC or agricultural cooperative. Two main criteria. The business itself has to be located in a hub zone, and at least 35% of its employees must reside in a hub zone. So what we're trying to do is incent firms to move to these areas and also employ people that live in these areas that are experiencing economic strife. You can go to the hub zone map to determine if the location you're concerned with is in fact hub zone qualified, and then if you want to do the same thing for your employees to determine if you meet the 35% threshold. Women-owned small business contracting program I talked about before. Again, it's all about ownership and control. So the firm has to be owned and controlled at least 51% by a woman or women, and they have to manage the day-to-day operations. You can see hold the highest officer position, or as I say, they have to be large and in charge. There's two different classifications, the more general women-owned small business, then there's also the economic disadvantaged women-owned small business, and there are various NAICS codes that are applicable to each one of those specific instances. And you can, down at the bottom, you can see where the NAICS codes can be found to determine if you are a women-owned small business, whether or not you might apply for the economic disadvantage WSB as well. Okay, and you can see some of the other eligibility criteria there as well. Service disabled veteran, pretty much the same thing. 51% ownership and control. There's the caveat down at the bottom where if it's a severe disability, then a spouse or permanent caregiver can actually run the day-to-day operations. But I think that's probably the exception rather than the norm. But there again, as with all the other programs, it's all about ownership and control. So, marketing to the federal government and prime contractors, because a lot of times the best way for a small business to enter into the federal arena is via subcontract opportunities. So Federal Procurement Data System, that's the big database in the sky that all contracting activity has to be input into that system. So if you can go to FPDS, you can start doing some research as to which agencies buy what it is I sell, where do they buy it, and also how do they buy it. Do they use small business set-asides, and if so, what type? There are some other, USA Spending is another database you can go to find out who's buying what. The Office of Small Disadvantaged Business Utilization, every agency has that, and that's kind of your entree point to, as a small business, to find out a contact point to start your marketing activities to that federal agency once you've determined that that particular agency is a target market of yours. And you want to visit their websites because they will have a portal for you to register as a small business typically. And so you can, and that's where they will post their opportunities as well. And we'll get into where the federal business opportunities, where a lot of things are posted, but a lot of agencies will post it on their own website as well. Like I mentioned, subcontracting could be a good entree point into the federal contracting arena, and you can see the directory there. And the other thing about federal prime contractors is they all have a portal for small businesses to register as well. So you want to go into their website, their small business portal or vendor portal or supplier portal, and register so that as they have bidding opportunities, they will send emails to you asking if you want to participate or want to submit a bid, those kind of things. You want to participate in events where the folks from the federal agencies that you're looking at, that they attend, whether it's local events, it could be events back in Washington, D.C., those kind of things. So you want to make sure that, you know, you try and facilitate an opportunity to have some one-on-one dialogue, some face-to-face dialogue, in addition to your email and phone call marketing activities. Every opportunity, supposedly $25,000 or above that's competed, has to be published in FedBizOps or fbo.gov, and you can see the link there. You can search by keyword, you can search by agency, you can search by geography, in order to do some market research to find out who's out there, who's soliciting for either a source aside or maybe it's a formal solicitation where they're asking for bids, those kind of things. So you can look for agency forecasts. Again, don't look past the prime contractors as well, because they'll use systems like SAM in order to do market research to try and find small business subcontractors as well. Because any federal contract over $650,000, the prime contractor has to complete a small business subcontracting plan. And the good news there is that now, with some strengthened language, we have the ability to enforce that to where if they don't use the small businesses that they've identified in their plan, we can actually debar them from doing business with the federal government. So again, look to primes as potential customers as well. Marketing materials, how do people find out what it is you do? Obviously SAM and your SBA profiles, because agencies use those religiously to do their market research. They will also look at your website. They may look at your social media accounts. We'll talk a little bit about a one-page capability statement and why that's important. Obviously business cards and your elevator speech. As you attend events, they're going to be shaking hands and talking with a lot of people, so you've got to have your 30-second elevator pitch ready to go so that in half a minute or less they know exactly who you are and what you do and what differentiates you from the other players in your industry. So capability statement. So if you go to an event, you come back, you get a stack of business cards, and you go through them. You say, these are the folks that I think I have an opportunity maybe to strike up a relationship. Well, I always suggest that you follow up the following week with a marketing email that includes your capability statement. And in one page, typically, it should be one page, you want to make sure that they fully understand exactly what you are, what you do, how to get a hold of you, what differentiates you, those kind of things. And what we have here is a couple of examples of what a capability statement might look like. And the reason it's important that it be clear and concise is when you send out the marketing email and they open it up that following week, you've got about 20 to 30 seconds of mind share because they're busy people. So there again, in a half a minute or less, you want them to be able to look at this capability statement, know your name, how to get a hold of you, what industry you play in, your industry codes, your contact information, all that stuff. If you're in construction, you want to have your bonding capacity there as well, so they can get an idea of just kind of, what you're capable of doing and that sort of thing. So a capability statement, clear and concise, is very important. My tagline is be persistent, don't be a pest. So about every 2 months or so, you might want to ping them again because you want to keep bubbling up to the top of their head with your business and your capabilities. Identifying contract opportunities. Again, we talked about FedBizOps. You can search again by set-asides. Sources sought is when agencies are out there kind of seeing who's interested. And they use that as a way of coming to a decision as to what type of set-aside they would probably use for the solicitation. So it's important that you, if you see an opportunity that interests you and it's a source of sought, that you respond to them so that they know you're out there. And if you're a HubZone firm or a women-owned small business, they'll know what you are, and then they, if they get enough critical mass of other like businesses, then maybe they'll do a HubZone set-aside or they'll do a women-owned small business set-aside, that kind of thing. So the net message is it's very important to respond to the source of sought. Okay, smaller requirements, acquisition.gov. Again, you want to link up with the Office of Small Business, Disadvantaged Business Utilization, or the small business specialists for the local divisions, if you will, of agencies as well. The government credit card. If what you're selling is conducive to small transactions, certainly look at the option of accepting the government credit card. There's thousands and thousands of federal contracting folks that can buy stuff with the credit card for under $3,000. And the last stat that I had was like 2011, some $19 billion worth of goods and services were purchased with the government purchase card. So that can be a huge opportunity as well, depending upon your particular product or service. There's kind of a screenshot on FBO what it looks like. It may be a little bit hard to see, but up at the top, those various boxes are where you can actually input the geography, the agency, keywords, whatever the case, whether it's a source of sought or a pre-solicitation, those kind of things. So I encourage you to go to FBO, get familiar with it, start doing some market research using that tool as well. Knowing the rules. Okay, the Federal Acquisition Regulation, the FAR, that's the Bible for contracting officers that they have to adhere to for contracting activities. You can see some of the different parts. Part 19 is the one that we're most involved with, which is the small business programs, all the different set-aside categories and that sort of thing. But depending upon the type of acquisition, Part 13 for simplified acquisitions, anything under $150,000 is reserved for small businesses. The mechanics of going through a simplified acquisition are a lot easier and streamlined versus larger contracting opportunities. So Part 13 kind of talks about what the rules and regulations are for that sort of thing. Part 8.4, federal supply schedules. You may have heard of GSA schedules. Those are multiple award contracts administered by the GSA, usually government-wide, primarily for commodity, product, and services, as opposed to things like construction, for example. 13 CFR is the Code of Federal Regulations. That's where you find the information about the specifics of the 8A program, the Hub Zone program, service-disabled veteran set-aside program, those kind of things. Okay, we've got about 5 minutes left, I think. So, yeah, we're getting kind of wrapping this up. So this is a high-level overview of kind of hints and tips of how to do business with the feds. The net message on this slide is you're not alone. There's a lot of resources available to help you, whether it's federal contracting, state, local, whether it's, you know, not even contracting related, whether it's access to capital, whether it's other sorts of business issues, or, you know, you're an entrepreneur with an idea and trying to figure out how to get it to a business. There's a lot of resources available. They're listed here. As Joy mentioned, the Jefferson Economic Development Institute is right there in Mount Shasta, but we've got a SCORE chapter in Chico. We've got the Procurement Technical Assistance Centers. Like I said, there's one in Eureka. There's the one down in Monterey that kind of handles your counties. We've got a Veterans Business Outreach Center down here in Sacramento that covers, I think, like 4 or 5 or 6 western states. So they're another valuable resource for consulting, counseling, you know, whatever the case may be. And then last is me. So here's my contact information. Send me an email, call me on the phone. If I'm at my desk, I promise I'll answer the phone. With that, Joy, I think we'll open it up to questions.
Wow. Well, thank you, Paul. It's interesting. I've got a few questions that came in, and I'm not surprised because that was so much information. So the first question is, can I get a copy of this PowerPoint? Lots to remember. So I just want to answer that and assure you all that we will be posting this recording on the JEDI YouTube channel, and you can just go to the ejedi.org website, and there'll be a link up in a few days. So we will have access to this as a recording. The next question that came in, Paul, does one have to be a U.S. citizen to participate in all Gov contracting certification bidding?
The short answer to that is yes.
Okay. Short answers work.
Yes, it's short and sweet.
Good and sweet. Anyone else have a question? Those were the two that came in so far. Paul, do you wanna highlight anything else that you went through quickly there, or?
Well, I think sure. Just a couple other parting thoughts, if you will. You know, I think depending upon what type of goods or service or what type of business you're in, you know, you have to kind of look at it, kind of look into your heart and say, you know, is the federal government really a customer space that I want to go after? Because, like I said, it's daunting. It's not for the faint of heart. It takes a lot of hard work because you're continually market. But I'm not trying to dissuade you because it can be very lucrative if you do a real good job of differentiating yourself vis-a-vis the competition and establishing really good working relationships with representatives from the different agencies that you've targeted. It takes a lot of focus. That's why I kind of emphasized doing some market research with the various agencies on the front end via the Federal Procurement Data System. Find out which agencies buy what it is you sell. How do they buy it? Does that kind of meld with how my go-to-business or my go-to-market strategy? And if it does, then, you know, it certainly could make sense for you to pursue it. And like I said, there's a lot of folks available to help you with that.
Well, and I think that's a really important place to end, is there are a lot of folks to help you with that, and isn't that a great gift? So we appreciate that you're there for us and that you've spent some time giving us kind of a broad sweep overview. Lots of good information for everyone. So thank you, Paul.
You're very welcome.
Very, very, very much. Well, we got our questions in, so the next slide, I just want to once again appreciate JEDI, and if you enjoyed this webinar and you'd like to contribute more to services like this in our community, you can join us as a member of JEDI. It's fun to be a member of JEDI. You get discounted services on the classes and the workshops, events, and counseling. You also get a really cool, big, beautiful mug. The computer lab and library is there for you to use, and this small contribution is something that can be a tax, charitable tax, or a business deduction. And more importantly, I think for all of us, it's just a feeling of satisfaction that you're investing in building a positive future, because we do believe that the businesses that get started by all of you do create a positive future. You're offering solutions to people's challenges, and we like to really work with small businesses locally because you truly are our positive future. Next slide shows a couple upcoming events at JEDI. So I did want you that are here in the Shasta and Siskiyou County area to know about what's up. So intellectual property with attorney Lisa Nixon, that is a really popular class. We usually offer it every year. So copyrights, trademarks, trade services. You're going to find out a lot about how you want to and if you want to protect your intellectual property. One of our flagship courses is called Making Your Money Work for You, and that is taught by the Renee Gautreaux. She's a fabulous woman who really understands how to assist people in getting a clear understanding of how money is or isn't working in their lives. And it's a great class, a lot of financial literacy, credit score checks, creating budgets, savings opportunities. So that starts up again on October 1st. And then It's Your Business is starting up on October 3rd. It will be offered on 4 Saturdays. So you can travel on up to Mount Shasta, and those of you who live here, take every other Saturday and focus on your business. This is for people who want to start or grow a business, people who are looking at a business idea and want to find out if it's viable and what it would take to actually have a business. And that's being taught for the first time by Linda Fitzgerald, who is a business consultant. She's very creative. She's also an Excel instructor, and she's just going to really be a wonderful presenter for all of you who take the course. November 3rd, your next Level Up Marketing Seminar. That's with Diane Strachan and Joanne Steele. 2 Tuesday evenings. This is a big thumbs up. We'll probably have what do I want to say? Register right away if you want to get into this class. These two women are phenomenal. And then our next webinar is November 18th with Lynn Teuscher from AGT, and we're going to go over what the different forms of business ownership are. So those are upcoming events. I have one more question. Do you plan to do more webinars, and how can I get help creating a business plan? We do webinars. We actually have one in October pending, which is going to be with the Board of Equalization on your seller's permit. So pretty much every month we do webinars. If you are not yet a member or on the email list of JEDI, you'll want to go to the ejedi.org website or call the phone number on the slide and become a member, ask to be a part of the mailing list, and you can ask then a little bit more about how to get help creating a business plan. But what I would recommend for anyone wanting to write a business plan now is take It's Your Business. Starting October 3rd, by the end of that class, you will have a business plan. And we also have counseling and one-on-one TA to help people take their business plan to a real formal level, and so it's loan ready for people who need that. So great questions. Thank you everyone for joining us. I think there's one more slide, just once again acknowledging and appreciating our sponsors, these organizations. And, you know, Paul, thank you. This was a delight, actually. You did a really good job of taking kind of a tedious topic and showing us the visuals and making a little more sense out of it all. So we are in great appreciation of your teaching talent as well as the information you covered today.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciated it, having the opportunity, and, you know, hopefully everybody got something out of it. And like I said, if you have any further questions, additional information wanted, or whatever, just contact us and we'll help you out.
Perfect. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.